That's where I saw him, in the exam room.
Did you stay in the room for the duration of Corey's exam?
I did.
And was Corey's mom in the room for the duration of the exam as well?
Yes.
When it came time for you to perform your portion of the exam, other than the weighing and measuring, was anybody else in the room other than the people you described?
No.
And could you tell me what, if any, initial observations of Corey did you make?
So when I entered the room, Corey was sitting on the exam table. That's where he had been brought to get his blood pressure taken and his pulse and his breathing and his pulse ox. He was sitting there, and the nurse had asked him to take his shirt off. So he had his pants on and shirt off, and he was sitting quietly on the exam table. And his mother was seated in the exam room next to the exam table.
And did you make any initial observations when you walked in of how Corey looked?
Yeah, so as a pediatrician, we rely not just on what patients say, but how they're acting, because they don't, kids don't just tell you something hurts. A lot of times they don't, or they don't. So you're always looking from the very start. How are they sitting? How are they looking? Do they look alert? Are they looking bright? Before we set an eye, before we touch a patient, we're looking for all the evidence, everything we can get. And he was sitting quietly. He was breathing easily. He didn't look in any distress. And he just looked very serious. And I'd say, kind of contained, like stoic, kind of, just very sitting.
Did you observe Corey's mom?
And so she was sitting, and she looked just very worried and concerned.
Okay. Did you observe any interaction between Corey and his mom?
Well, he would look at her, and they would just look at each other as I was asking first the mother. Now I'm going to find out from them what is the history, like what's happened, or what are you worried about? So what we call, and she was listed as the independent historian. She was the one to give the history, as parents do, first.
Did you tell Corey anything about his visit with you that day, or the purpose of his visit?
So based on, I do give children a chance to say what hurts or what's the problem or what happened, if it's an injury, how did you get hurt? So I did that, and he at first didn't want to say anything. Shook his head. No, I don't know. And so I explained to him that in order to help him, I had to know how he got hurt and what happened. And still he hesitated, so I said, Corey, we can't help you if we don't know what happened, and please, and don't worry, because I need to know so I can help you be safe.
And did Corey give you any response?
And so he looked at his mom, and she said,
you can't tell me what anybody else
okay.
said, but did Corey give you a response?
He did. He said that he got the chest and arm and hip bruises and the forehead scrape when he was playing football outside on the turf. And he said that his dad was teaching him how to catch a football. And when I pressed him further, that's a lot from playing football. He said he got more bruises when he fell from a treadmill.
And what was his demeanor while you were speaking with him and he was speaking with you?
Well, as he was explaining this, his mother teared up and started to cry, and then he got tearful as well.
Did you end up conducting an examination of Corey?
I did.
And could you tell me what that examination at first consisted of?
So I reviewed his, what the nurses had found out, and he had a normal blood pressure. He had what we call a pulse ox test that tests on the finger this oxygen level. It was 98%. His pulse rate was 90, and his respiratory rate was 24. His temperature was 98.6, so it was normal, no fever. And I considered those vital signs normal for his age.
Did you go on to conduct an examination, like a general one, or ear, nose, and throat, or anything like that?
Yes, and I'm noticing here when I said my first thing is generally just look at them, and he had normal activity and normal interaction. I forgot he said, tell me that, I don't know, I have something in my notes that you might want to.
Why don't you show it without speaking, so you show it to Ms. Strong, and I'll counsel the sergeant.
I was asking you about the examination of Corey that you conducted. Could you please describe the examination that you performed on Corey?
Yes, so as I said, he had normal activity and alertness, was sitting up without favoring anything. His eyes, when I say eyes, were clear. I looked at the external, everything looked normal. The whites of his eyes looked normal. I looked inside his eyes with a ophthalmoscope and then into the back of his eyes, that was normal. I examined his ears, canal, and his tympanic membranes. The canals were clear. His throat was clear. He didn't have any redness of his throat. He had no signs of any viral. When I say viral stigmata, I mean he had no runny nose, no mucus. His neck, he could move it all directions. It was supple. He wasn't favoring it. And he had no what we call cervical adenopathy, meaning he had no enlarged lymph nodes anywhere on his neck. And the other thing that I look for when there's infection is if there's tenderness over the cheekbones, to look at the sinuses, and I checked them and they were not tender, and the other sinuses I palpated and there was no tenderness. I listened to his heart and it was a regular rate and rhythm. He didn't have any murmurs. He had normal heart sounds. And his breathing, I had already observed that he wasn't breathing fast or heavy. He wasn't sucking what we call labored, sucking his ribs in, making any effort. He was just breathing normally, quietly. And when I listened to him with a stethoscope, his lungs were clear. And he had what we call good air movement, meaning he had a full breath in and out. And I was particularly interested because some of I was interested in any rib injuries. In fact, I palpated all his, I had him lay down, I checked his abdomen, it wasn't distended. When I say HSMM, he had no enlargement that I could feel of his liver, his spleen, or any masses that I could feel. He didn't guard, because sometimes children don't tell you that things hurt. So I push hard, and there was no tightening of his muscles. There was nothing, and I listened to his bowel sounds, and meaning I listened with a stethoscope, and they were normal. So everything was good with his bowels. As far as neurologic, he was alert. When I say oriented times 3, he knew where he was, he knew who he was and who he was with. Checked pupils, their reactivity, and his eye movements, all his cranial nerves. There was no drooping. Everything, when he moved his mouth, there wasn't any drooping. And then I went on to look at his musculoskeletal system. I also I noted all of the findings on his skin. I can talk about them now, or I can complete the rest of the exam and then talk
Did you-
about that.
Could you tell me about the rest of the exam first?
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure he didn't have any injuries to his muscles or bones. So I had him raise his arms up over his head, and he could do that. He could move them every way I wanted. He could, I had him get off the table and walk for me and jump up and down. Without any difficulty, without favoring anything. He had a normal gait. And I checked all his muscles, which for me is he has to hold him out. I got to push him down. He's got to push me away, laying down. Absolutely nothing that I was worried about with his muscles or his bones. He had no swelling. I had him stand on each foot, and he could bear weight because sometimes you've even, so I made sure he had no problems with that. He had no swelling or warmth, anything that would suggest an infection of his skin, or no swelling. And when I say no pain, with palpation of his chest, I push on all the ribs and all the bones to make sure that there wasn't any sign of rib or bone tenderness anywhere.
And doctor, were you making a pushing motion with your hands when you did that?
Yeah, so I'm making,
Is that in your rib area that you're
all
doing
the
that?
ribs. I push every bone I can.
Okay. And up until that point, what you testified to so far, did you make any findings or discover any problems?
No, and then I did check his genitalia, and there was nothing, no problems or masses or abnormalities there as well. The abnormalities that I saw were on his skin.
Okay. And did you document that anywhere?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Where did you document?
I have a body, I used a body chart because to be able to show and be able to remember where I saw any lesions on his skin.
Judge, may I approach the witness?
Sir.
Dr. Deacon, I'm showing you what's been marked as S43 for identification. Could you take a look at it for me, please?
Yes,
Okay. Do you recognize that?
I do.
What is that?
And this is my body chart that showed that, and I have written down the lesions that I noticed on his body. It says it was done. I labeled it as 4/1/21 Corey Micciolo.
And when you say his, you mean Corey's body?
Corey's body, yes.
Okay. And does S43 accurately depict the observations that you made of Corey's body when he was at the visit at your office on April 1st, 2021?
It does.
Okay. Could you take me through the observations that were on Corey's body that you documented, please?
Okay, so I'm going to start the head and work my way down front side of his body first. Present on his left forehead was what I described as pink granulation tissue with a tiny scab. What that means is that there was dry pink tissue with a little scab.
Doctor, could you
I'm
just tell me
pointing
when you
to-
point to a body part where you're pointing on
Yeah,
your
so I'm
body?
pointing to my left forehead. There was a blue-gray bruise over his left cheek, and I'm pointing to the bone right here on his left side of his face. Number 3 was a large yellow-green bruise, and that was located overlying his shoulder, his trapezius, and I'm pointing to my left shoulder right here. 4 was another large yellow-green bruise, and when we have the standing pose, the arms are like this, so it was on the left inner arm.
When you say standing like this, are
I
you
was standing with my
arms
palms facing forward.
out? Okay.
The fifth thing that I noticed, or that I wrote down, was a blue bruise present over the elbow, and I'm pointing to the inner aspect of the elbow overlying the bone. On 6, was on the right side of his chest, and it was 2 areas of what I called hyperpigmented skin, which was the skin was white compared to the skin of around him. So for me, that means that was a healing area of healing skin where it's healed, but the pigment hasn't come back yet. 7 was my impression. The 7th was a linear scar. When I say linear, I mean like a line, and it was present on the right lower abdomen. Pink, and I called it a scar, pink scar. 8. These were superficial fresh scratches. They were located below the belly button, above the pubic bone in the center of his body. By superficial, I mean they looked, I called them fresh because you could see that they hadn't formed a scab. There was like a little bit of moistness to them that looked like a scratch that just happened or could have happened. 9 were blue bruises, and I made 3 circles, and they were located on the left lower leg, the front part of it overlying the shin. So the area where the bone, you can feel the bone on the lower leg. And then 11 and 10 and 11 were what I described as tiny scratches on the lower front of his ankles, between the foot and the lower part of his leg.
All right, he's an active 6-year-old boy. There can be some bruises. That's a lot of bruises for one boy. And if you got a lot of them playing football with his dad, something's wrong there. Shouldn't have to have those kind of bruises. Teaching your son how to play football. Anyway, more testimony on the other side from this doctor. Keep it here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice. Welcome back to our special coverage of the treadmill abuse murder trial going on in New Jersey. I'm Micciolo, the pediatrician who examined the victim, 6-year-old Corey Micciolo, is on the stand. Now, she examined him before he died. She's testifying now to some of the bruises that she noticed on him. This was one day before he died. She's visiting him. She says, hey, take him to the hospital after what she sees. But again, he does present relatively normal. Let's go back into court.
Now, located on the back, his back of his body, so he'd be facing this way with the palms. 12 was a large yellow-green bruise, and that was located on the back of his left upper arm, overlying this kind of fatty muscle tissue. And 14 was another large yellow-green bruise, and it was located at the waist. Now I'm talking about this left side, right here, kind of over this upper part of the glute muscle. It's over the soft tissue.
Doctor, are you turning around when you show us
I'm turning
that?
around and I'm showing you my back left side.
Is that everything that you have on your chart, doctor?
That's everything.
Okay. And were those 14
That
areas
was
of the
14.
body that you described?
Yeah, that last one was 14. Oh, and 13, did I describe 13? Was another bruise located on the elbow, on the backside of the, over that bony process of that arm.
Was that everything you did that was part of your examination then?
Yeah, just double check. That was all that was the extent of my exam.
Did you make a plan for Corey before he left your office?
I did. So, assessment is what we do after the physical exam. What is my assessment of Corey? And my assessment was normal bruises, numerous bruises with different stages of healing and healed abrasions with a history of falling on a treadmill and getting hit with a football. Mostly over bony prominences, but some were over soft tissue areas.
What was the plan that you made for Corey?
So for me, there were bruises that you could explain, by the ones over bony processes with falling, with the play that children do. There's common areas where we have bruises, and then there's areas over soft tissue that it takes more of a blow, more usually, to have that size of a bruise and that kind of injury. That's why I was trying so hard to make sure there wasn't any underlying bone or just because they were so big. And so through my mind is, well, when you have those kinds of bruises, it takes either a bigger, harder force, or he might have a reason why he bruises easily. So I had said I want to rule out any bleeding or clotting abnormality because those children can have extensive bruising as well.
Did you make recommendations for Corey before he left your office?
Yeah, so I told Mom that we needed to bring him he needed to go right to the hospital. That we had to be sure that he wasn't at risk for even worse bleeding, and with blood work. And honestly, from what I learned and what he said and my whole impression of this visit, that he needed further, even if the DCP&P hadn't been involved, I would have called them. But I thought I'll send him to the hospital for a further evaluation because he needed more careful evaluation and expert interviewing. That's not my role as a general pediatrician. He needed more care before I would consider him safe to go home.
When you finished with your examination of Corey and making recommendations, did you contact anybody about Corey and your recommendations?
I did. So I called, this is now 5:45, 6 o'clock, it's getting late. And so I call when I have a concern, I have a careful record, but I wanted to also let them know what I was worried about. And so I called the emergency department physician. I had wanted him to go to Jersey Shore, but with time constraints from the mother, she did agree to take him right across the street.